Welcome to the Effective Literacy Podcast. On today's episode, we have part 2 of our interview with Dr. Laurie Olsen, during which we learn what we can do to partner with families and our communities in our efforts to support our multilingual learners, as well as what's going well across the nation in regard to educational policy.
So you talked a little bit about books going home to families and different ways that we can support our families. But I'm wondering if you might talk a little bit more about that. How might schools and families partner? That it's really giving families an opportunity to feel, like you said, a sense of belonging and partnerships to ensure that students are successful with effective literacy.
The first thing is the invitation, making it really clear to families that you're welcome. We need to be together in this endeavor of supporting your child to become biliterate, a person. And I, as a teacher, can't do that bi part of the literacy. I can't do anything other than the English part if I'm monolingual. And so we need to be in this together. So that invitation, that understanding with parents and families that whereas the school may be primarily an English world, we need that home language. Your children need that home language. And so how can we support you around really developing that? Through all of the years of the English only movement in California, the message that was sent home to families over and over again, and from their own experiences in school, is that home language was a problem. And there's a mind switch that has to happen for our whole state. And it's happened somewhat politically in policy in California. It's filtered down to some degree to teachers, but that basic lack of understanding of the importance of home language is really holding back literacy and education in California. So our families need help understanding how important that is. And then they need various strategies for what they can do in their lives. We're not asking them to become the classroom teachers. We're asking them to strengthen home language, to talk to your kids, help develop the vocabulary for whatever it is that they're learning about. If it's an insect unit, talk to your kids about insect units about insects in your home language. We're sending books home so that they can look through them, even if they can't necessarily read them, but perhaps they can read them in the home language to their child. But we send the books home to look at the pictures with your child and talk to them about the subject. Ask them questions, to have them talk to you. Develop the as much focus on language and literacy in your home as you can. Use your family cultural practices. Maybe it's around what you do, dichos and songs and chants that you have from your own culture. Stories are really, really important from your own culture. The cereal box on the table becomes fodder for reading. So helping families understand how they can use what they have at home around the strength of home language and how important that is to kids is really important. But then there are great family literacy programs too that schools can have, and family leadership programs that focus on academic skills for the kids.
Absolutely. You've given me some really good things to think about. I have a new position as a principal this year, and really thinking about how do I make sure that invitation is my first message. So thank you for that. That was awesome.
One other thing about that, it's important for us as teachers and for our kids to see us as teachers also being language learners. So teachers should always be asking kids things like, we're learning about the frog. How do you say that in Spanish? Do you know? Can you find out and come and tell me? And then the whole class learns that. The teacher needs to be a language learner also and model it's okay if you don't necessarily know the language, as long as you're pursuing learning it. So that helps too.
You know what? I'm going to switch subjects a little bit because you touched on something that really kind of piqued my interest, Laurie, and that was this whole this mind shift that our whole world has to come to, right? We have a lot of parents, a lot of former students that are still dealing with some trauma about that English only movement. We even have some teachers in our system that still have trauma from that English only movement. So I want to take a moment to kind of talk about some of those like state and district policies that are really good for our students and really great for literacy. And then also on the flip side, kind of talk about some of those that aren't so good. So could we go ahead and start with the positive, right? I want to stay in the happy part, but do you know of some educational policies, either state or district, that you think are really good for our instruction of our emergent bilinguals?
I do. and and let me first say that the research is totally clear on the benefits of bilingualism, on the benefits of biliteracy. And so there's no research question about this. So anybody who's sitting there thinking, well, how can we have good policy when, it might be a bad thing for kids to have two languages confusing them in their brain. So there's no research question. It is a great gift to our children to be bilingual and biliterate. And it's a great gift, particularly to multilingual learners and English learners, to be able to hold that home language and develop it with pride and strength throughout their whole life, because that's their connection to culture and family. Having said that, what's important is that we have policy that acts upon that and that makes that possible. And particularly given that of the history of English only, where policies really weren't that way, it has required some real changes. So one of the early changes we were able to bring about was the Seal of Biliteracy, which is simply an honor given to kids graduating from high school proficient in two or more languages. It's an easy thing to implement. It means something. It's the state of California, which was the first state in the union to do it, and now it is spread across almost every state in the union, because it says to the world, for everybody, biliteracy is a high-level skill. It's a value. Now, that's different, though, from the policies we need to build the program so kids can really become biliterate, because the reality is that most kids that come to school with a language other than English end up abandoning or losing their home language as they become English speaking. It's called being subtractive. So we need the programs that are going to affirm and teach and instruct biliterally. So the really good policies are ones that support the development of dual language programs with the kind of funding that's needed, with the teacher preparation that's needed. We have a shortage of bilingual teachers in the nation, and so we need pipelines for bilingual teachers. Those are the kinds of policies that can really make a difference. Yeah, teacher preparation is another important part of it, seeing to it that it's built into and baked into the creation of teachers, and understanding of multilingualism and how literacy fits into that and what it looks like to instruct for biliteracy. Beyond that, I think what we need is good guidance. So I'm thinking now of things like curriculum frameworks, that kind of thing. That's not quite policy, but it does give teachers and principals and districts a picture of what it looks like to set up a program that takes kids in a coherent pathway all the way to high levels of biliteracy. So those frameworks can make a difference. And actually, California has also our California English Learner Roadmap Policy, which is the state English Learner Policy just passed 5 years ago, which proclaims bilingualism as one of the goals of schooling. It lays out principles for schooling, including asset-based, honoring and affirming and welcoming the languages and cultures of the children, high-level instruction and intellectual rigor, because it is rigorous to become biliterate and to have that kind of education. So those are the kinds of policies that really make a difference.
So, Dr. Olsen, I also really want to talk about some state, but in my experience, it's been more district or school policies that really create obstacles to effective literacy. And so without naming any names, right? But can you kind of touch on some of those state or district policies that really have become obstacles for us?
And I don't think that we're looking for like bad mouthing one specific person, but I'm really thinking like if I'm a teacher listening to this podcast, if I hear something that I think, ooh, that's making it harder for me, also, I need to be able to recognize what's the obstacle and then also what can I do about it, without going against what my district's telling me to do, but at the same time, what do I have power over?
So there are a couple of very harmful things. One is the purchase of what are thought of as teacher-proof curriculum. That is a scripted, one-size-fits-all, meant to see to it that every single teacher follows these exact steps with every single child. And it's meant from a kind of an equity point of view, usually when those are adopted, or from a view that, well, our teachers don't really have capacity, so we have to tell them what to do. But it absolutely undermines one of the basic premises of teaching, which is that you are teaching children, individuals, and you need to know those kids, respond to them and their needs. And given that our English learners are a whole class of kids with different needs from the standard model of the English proficient child, those kind of scripted teacher-proof curriculum are just death to literacy and to teachers, because they end up having to do things that they know aren't meeting the needs of their kids. And most of those programs, I will say, is based on research that was done on English proficient students that did not include the research on children who are English learners. And so they're getting a pedagogy that isn't even designed for them. They fall behind, and what the response is, we'll give them more of it because they failed it, so we'll give them more and give them more. It pushes out everything else from the school day. Now they're in intervention. They don't get science. They don't get social studies. They're not getting the arts. And that's what happened under the No Child Left Behind years. And that's what I think we're in danger of seeing again. Now, Anna, you said, well, what does a teacher do in those situations? Right. You can close the door and try to supplement as much as you can. One of the important things is to see to it that those other elements that are context that are so important for literacy development that I talked about, like just reading to your kids, having the books there and trying to engross them in the joy of reading, finding as many ways as possible to do that, and finding as many ways as possible to, through the ELD, to also do some cross-language work. Those are kind of the little openings that teachers have if the system is going to purchasing these one-size-fits-all curriculum that are teacher-proof. So that's one thing that worries me. Another is just that old English-only world that approaches English learners as if the only task is learning English. They don't really have another language. So damaging to children, so hampering their literacy development. So again, for the teacher in the classroom, if you need to do some learning. And some of that learning is about the dual language brain. What does a child come with, and how can I leverage that in whatever ways I can? And if you're a principal, you can decide to do some professional learning for your school. If you're an individual teacher, you can go to the CABE conference or some other conferences and try to pick that up. But you need to make it your responsibility to learn about the dual language brain and what that means for literacy, because English-only approaches only make the gap greater. They work for the English proficient kids. They don't work so well for the English learners. The other thing that goes wrong in all of this is the reliance on assessments that only assess the most micro aspects of literacy, like phonics. And you can get an English learner to be able to decode and sound out ball, having no idea what a ball is. And they can look like they're doing okay on an assessment of phonics, and then people assume, okay, they know how to read. But they don't. They struggle. They don't yet know how to read. They don't have any of the other aspects of language or literacy skills that they need. But districts keep repeatedly relying on these very narrow, teeny assessments as how they determine reading and what needs to happen. And so for an English learner who may struggle with decoding and those simple technical aspects of reading, because they don't have the English system in their brain, so they don't have that phonology to even make sense of it, they're going to get more and more and more and more and more of that same instruction, because the assessments keep pointing to, they don't have this yet, keep working on it. They don't have it yet, keep working on that one point, leaving out all of the other richness of a comprehensive literacy program. So the assessment part is a huge problem.
You've given us a lot to think about, Dr. Olsen. I think it's going to take definitely some days to really think about, your expertise, your experience, and then fold them into our experiences and how we can set up schools, support teachers, support families, support students to really prioritize and think about and then become advocates for English learners when it comes to becoming literate individuals. So we are so appreciative of that. Before we let you go, we do always like to ask our guests two very important questions about you as a literate individual and who you are. So what are you currently reading or even writing personally or professionally?
Well, currently I'm doing a lot of writing about effective literacy for English learners and critiquing the science of reading movement. I'm doing a lot of writing on that right now. I'm also writing about curriculum. So it's all kind of professionally focused, but I'm on fire. I'm just like, my brain is going and I'm writing late at night. And I love writing. It's really one of my tools. And I do a lot of public speaking, but I always write my speeches first. Not that I read them word for word, but because writing is the process through which I really think and hone my language and hone my words and sort of get my thoughts down on paper. So writing is both a product in my life, but it's also a really essential process.
Well, as a consumer of many of your writings, I appreciate that very much because your writing has really helped support educators in California and across the nation. So yay, keep that up. Keep the fire going. And then final question. This is always the trickiest question. It's what's your all-time favorite book?
There is no all-time favorite book. Because books are so many different things.
Yeah.
You know, there are some that are my favorite for entertainment and escape, and some that are my favorite because I really need to be hearing these words right now in my life. There are books that are my favorites from childhood that I go back and I read again and still find magic in them, even though I look at them now as a 75-year-old woman thinking, I could never give this to my grandchild because I now understand certain things like the Laura Ingalls Wilder books, which I loved as a child and meant so much to me. And now I look at them and I recognize some of the political problems of them. Mm-hmm. But still, I have them on my bookshelf, you know? So for me, it's my book collection. And having just gone through a move, I'll say that one of the most painful things is parting with books because there are hundreds of books that have meant so much to me.
Thank you for listening. We are the Effective Literacy Podcast. Dr. Olsen, thank you so much for joining us today. Listeners, our conversation with Dr. Olsen continued after we stopped recording, and she reminded us of the importance of libraries. So hear more about this as we make meaning of our first 3 episodes in episode 6. For more information, visit our show notes at multilingualliteracy.org and make sure to subscribe to the podcast and share with your friends.